All right, guys, today in the Sharp Academy, we're talking about building your own lines for sports that are low scoring and score in increments of one. So I'm thinking soccer, baseball, hockey, sports like that. What I'm going to show you today is not necessarily going to work for football or basketball. So we'll do that in another video. But first, I just want to remind you, this is brought to you by the Sharp app and the guys at sharpbets.app. All right, so let's talk about what we're doing here today. And we're going to be using Poisson, Poisson distribution. I've got a previous video on Poisson and how you would use that for props. Things like how many three-pointers would be made by a specific player in a game. I've got a whole video on that, and that's going to give you a good background on how to use Poisson. But we're going to use Poisson distribution to determine what the line should be on a game. And I'm going to show you just how to do that. As always, we'll dive into a spreadsheet so that you guys can see exactly how to build this for yourself. It's going to help you build your own spreadsheets to which you can always expand on the things that you learn here. What we're hoping to do here is build your base, your foundation in your sports betting journey, and hopefully in you building some models and becoming profitable. Without further ado, let's head on over to the spreadsheet. All right, guys, so I put a spreadsheet together, and again, this could be for NHL or soccer or baseball. Let's start all the way in the upper left at the beginning here. I just put team A and B. The stuff that I don't have highlighted is stuff that we're going to type in. Presumably, if you had a model, you would be linking this to some other sheet where you're getting your expected score. And as I say expected score, we look here, I'm just typing in a hypothetical score here. We could change this to anything that we want, and I'll show you that in a bit and show you how the numbers change. But this is probably going to be, if you're at this point, this is going to be something that you're deriving from a model where you're getting an expected score for each one of these teams. So let's just say, for argument's sake here, that we've got team A, we've got an expected score of 3.2. Let's just say this is the NHL. We expect a 3.2 goals for team A. Team B, we're expecting 2.17 goals. And the line is minus 250 plus 210. So I'm just copying the make-believe hypothetical line here, let's say from your sportsbook, Draftkings, Fanduel, BetMGM, whatever it may be, and you put your line in here. Perhaps you have the Sharp app and you've got multiple sports books and you want to just put, we've got the best odds, which is a really nice feature over on the app, where you can just put in the best odds at the books in your state, and you would put that in here so that you know which side of this game and which sports book it is that has the best odds. And that would certainly help you out in tightening up the spread. And by spread, I mean this 250 to 210. You might have best odds of minus 240 plus 220 at various books. Fanduel may be offering a minus 240, and you may be getting plus 220 over at BetMGM. So that tightens up that gap, which we call the spread for the money line. And of course, that's going to help you out become more profitable if you could get minus 240 or plus 220, a whole lot better than minus 250 plus 210 that maybe one book is offering. That's an aside. I'm just going to put in here the best odds that I have at my sports books, and let's just assume this was minus 250 plus 210. Now, what's in yellow is going to be the formulas, and I'm going to show you how we get to that point. Now, I'm also going to show you guys how to do this for the total. So on this hypothetical game, I've got over and under. We put that in here. I'm again typing in 5.5 is what the book has, let's say, on this hypothetical, and this is the juice. So hypothetically, the sports book is juicing this minus 120 on the over and even money plus 100 on the under. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways we could do this. First, I've got this colorful box here in the middle of the spreadsheet. So we'll take a look at that and what exactly I did. All I did was make a grid here from 0 to 9, 0 to 9. You could expand this, go 10, 11. But as you can see here, we don't have too much data when we get out to 9. But of course, if you're in a sport like, let's say, baseball or something like that, where you can expect a few more runs, we might have a 6 expectation for a team against a 5. Maybe it's a Colorado Rockies game or something like that. We'll just expand this grid, okay? Just keep adding numbers until you get to a point where we've got a lot of zeros, and then we know we've gone far enough when there's no more data to accumulate. So I make this grid. In this case, like I said, it's a 0x9 grid, which is basically a 10x10 grid. Now, what's inside of here? What I'm doing is a Poisson distribution. Again, refer back to the previous videos on Poisson to understand it a little bit more, but I'm assuming here that you have a little background with Poisson distribution in Excel. It's very simply, the formula is, we'll bring it up here, Poisson.dist, and then parentheses, right? So the first thing we need in the formula is the X factor. Now, X is the number that we're trying to figure out, will this team score X? So we want to know, will this team score 0? Now, what I should put before we continue is, let's just say this is team A up top, and I've got team B on the side here. I should do this vertically, but you get the idea. We've got team A. These are the scores for team A. This is the potential scores for team B on the side. Now, back to Poisson. What we're looking to do here is find what's the probability, using Poisson, that team A scores 0 goals. We're looking for the 0 goals, so the first thing after the parentheses is X. That's the 0 goals. That's what we're looking for. And we use a mean as the second. The mean would be the second number, so there's a comma, and then B2 in this case is the mean. And by mean, that's our projection, because the projection should be the average score over time that this team will score in this game. That's really what a projection is. It's just giving us what the average would be if they played this over and over thousands of times this game. According to our model, our pretend model here, we can expect 3.2 goals to be scored. That would be your mean. And then the false here is just based on whether or not it's cumulative or not. We do not want this to be cumulative. We're looking specifically for the percentage of times that they score 0. Now we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to multiply that number by the same Poisson distribution for 0 for team B. So the same thing, we use H3 in this case. H3 is the 0. Then we use B3, which is team B's expected score. So we go over to team B. We use the projection of 2.17 as the mean, and then false again as the cumulative. And that is it. So you're going to get a 0.5% chance that this game finishes 0-0 based on these projections. You're going to do the same thing through this entire grid, and you'll do the probability that the game ends team A 1, team A 0, so on and so forth. And then I just did a simple conditional formatting for the higher numbers being in green, the lower numbers being in red, and that just helps you visualize it. But as you can see, and this should make sense, is that the predominant amount, the predominant percentage is somewhere around these scores. So the game should end somewhere between team A winning 2-1, or the game going into overtime 2-2, or if this was soccer, maybe ending 2-2, 3-2 by team B, 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, 4-1, you get the idea. So almost half, 43% of all outcomes should land right in this range, which should make sense based on teams that are projected to score 3.2 and 2.17. All right, so what can we do with that? Well, to me, this is more helpful as a visualization. So if you don't want to go ahead and do it this way, you don't have to. How I like to do it for when I'm running a model and trying to figure out what my line is going to be is I like to put these in columns. All right, so you're going to see these columns now below where I've got team A down here and team B. I've got the same exact scores as we did on the grid. So I'm just going to put every single scoring combination that there possibly could be. And again, like I said, if this is baseball and you want to incorporate more scores, maybe you want to take this up to 15 or 16 runs for each team, go ahead and do that. Of course, you're going to run into, I know games do end 15 runs, 14 runs. It just doesn't happen often enough. So you're going to wind up with very small percentages. But go ahead and do it until you get to the point where you're getting pretty much all of the combinations incorporated. And you'll know that when you do a cumulative, you should be somewhere between 99% and 100%. We've got Team A and we've got all their potential scores. Then we've got Team B and all their potential scores. So we've got Team A winning the Team A and Team B tying at 0. Then Team A wins 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, so on and so forth. Then I do all the ones for Team B. So now Team B wins the game 0-1. 1-1, 2-1, Team A wins, so on and so forth. In this column here, next to it, all I'm doing is the same thing here. I could have just done a Poisson here. When I was building the spreadsheet, I was using these columns for something else. So I've got the Poisson, what the Poisson is for each one of these numbers for Team A. So the probability that Team A scores 0 goals is going to be 4. We can put this in percentage terms if that makes it easier for you guys to see. So there's a 4.1% chance they score 0, 13% chance they score 1 goal, 20.9% chance it's 2 goals, and 22.3% chance it's 3. And that should make sense because our projection was 3.2. So they should score, most likely, they can't score 3.2 goals. So the most likely scenario is they're going to score 3 goals, and there's a 22.3% chance that is the case. 4 goals would be 17.8% of the time. We do the same thing for B, and I can put this in percentages as well to help you visualize it. And the projection for Team B was 2.17. So we're looking at, of course, the probability of their hitting these certain numbers being lower because we're only expecting 2.17 goals. So we expect 2 to be the most likely outcome of this game for Team B. So, of course, we're seeing a 3-2 score is the most likely, but again, still a fairly low probability. Anyway, we move over to what I was talking about here with the columns. You've got Team A and B, and again, we've got every single score for Team A, every single score for Team B. We've got all the scoring combinations that we think are possible. In this column, I just did a VLOOKUP for the probability that Team A scored 0, and we can see in here it's 4.1. We've got the probability that Team B scores 0, that's 11.4%. And then again, here, we're just going to multiply these. So don't worry about the totals right now. I'm going to get into totals in a bit. But we're just going to multiply these, and we'll figure out the probability that should equal these. It should be the same, 0.5% probability that this game ends 0-0. And it should be the same as this 10 by 10 grid that we talked about earlier. Again, 1-0, the probability is 1.5. Team A wins 1-0. If we look up here, we've got 1.5 as well. So we'll do this all the way down. We get the probability of each and every score, every outcome. And then we need to figure out what's the probability that Team A wins or Team B wins. Well, to do this, we take all the possible outcomes, all the percentages, and then we add them up. So we need to look at every time Team A is a winner and then add that up for Team A. And then every time Team B is a winner and add that up for Team B. Now, how I do that is I just do a simple if statement. So if we just take a look here, I've got an if statement in here where if Team A, the score here for Team A is greater than Team B, that would be a victory for Team A. And if that is the case, I want the probability to be posted right here because that is a probability for Team A winning. If not, then just put 0 because that's not one of the scenarios that we're looking for. Now, the same thing in the Team B column. I want to know if Team B here, if this number, which is 0 on the first line, is greater than Team A's number, that means it's a victory for Team B, and I want you to take the probability and put it in this column. If not, return 0. So in this case, we have a 0% and a 0%. Because this is a 0-0 tie. So now how do I check for ties? Just the same thing. It's an if statement. I want to see if A and B are equal to each other, then return the probability. That's going to show me one of the instances where a tie is possible. So in this case, and we can put this in percentages as well to help you visualize if you like. So we've got a 0.47 or 0.5% probability that we get a tie in this case. So we'll do that all the way down. Now, here you see on the next one, Team A wins this 1-0. So we want to account for that in column A or Team A's column as a victory. When they win 2-0, we want to know the probability of that, so on and so forth. The first time, then we get to a 1-0 win by Team B, and that's going to get added into Team B's win column. What we'll just simply do is just go through every one of these, and then at the bottom, here's the probability that Team A wins this. And again, if we're looking at a sport like soccer or hockey, this is the probability that this game ends in regulation with a victory by Team A, because we're taking all the possible outcomes of Team A winning. In this case, it would be 58.59%. The probability Team B wins, when we add this all up, is 25.07%. And the probability of a tie is 16.5%. Okay, so how do we use those numbers now to figure out what the line should be? Well, let's go back here to my line. So all I'm going to do now is find out the probability for Team A and Team B. Now, in this case, I'm coming up with a line where there are no ties. So if this was baseball, we have to disregard ties eventually if playing to someone wins. If this was hockey and we were just trying to figure out a line, a two-way line as we call it, then we would disregard ties because the ties are not going to be part of this. In soccer, if we're doing a three-way line, we have to incorporate ties into the equation. I've talked about this in another lesson. So if there is an event being played, there is a 100% chance that some outcome is going to happen. Whatever different amount of outcomes you can possibly have. Let's say this is some sort of an election and there are 10 candidates. Well, one of those 10 candidates must win the election. All of the probabilities of those candidates winning need to equal 100. If we're playing a baseball game, there's going to be a winner and a loser. There's only two possible outcomes. There are no ties. The combined probabilities of both teams winning need to equal 100. If we're in a sport like soccer where ties are common, then that's called a three-way line, and the accumulation of Team A winning, Team B winning, and tie need to all be combined, and those would equal 100%. It's the only three scenarios that are possible. So we're always making sure that we've got a 100% probability and we're incorporating all of the percentages. But now when we do an analysis like this with Poisson, if you've got these low scoring sports like baseball, like hockey, but we don't want to take into account tie, we're looking at a line that is a two-way line. It's just asking who's going to win, who's going to lose this game. But as you can see, in the real world and when you watch sports, ties will exist, especially in these sports. Now, this is similar to saying we've got three different colored marbles in a bag. We've got black marbles, red marbles, and yellow marbles. Now, every time we pick out a yellow marble, it doesn't count. We don't care. So we can pick out yellow marbles all day long. It doesn't count towards the game. The yellow marbles are ties. So let's assume we've got 6 black marbles, 2 yellow marbles, and 2 red marbles. The red marbles will be a win for Team B. The black marbles would be a win for Team A. And the yellow marbles would be a tie. But every time we pull that yellow marble, it doesn't count. So we don't care if we're trying to figure out what the probability is and what you should pay me every time I pull a black marble, we have to disregard yellow, because every time we pull yellow, we just throw it back in and pretend it wasn't even there. So essentially we could pretend it's not even there by taking those yellow marbles out of the bag and not using them. Then the 100% is not 10 marbles anymore, it's 8 marbles. So now there's a 100% chance we're going to pick either black or red out of that bag. So we could have had 50 yellow marbles in that bag. It wouldn't make a difference. We're now taking them out because they're not counting towards our wager. If we were betting with a friend on whether we're pulling black or red out, and every time yellow came out, it was a no bet, that's how we would do it. So we've got now 6 of the black marbles, or a 60% chance that Team A is going to win. We've got 2 of the black marbles in the bag, or a 20% chance that Team B is going to win. We had those 2 yellows in the bag, a 20% chance that the game ended in a tie, and now we take those out. So we've got 6 black, we've got 2 red, and we're going to just simply divide the 2. So you can see you've got a 3-to-1 shot. There are 3 black marbles for every 1 red marble in that bag. So you've got a 3-to-1 shot. You'd want to build A fair line, if you were playing with a friend, would be 3-1. And if you were going to shade it in one person's direction or the other, you would do it from there. So hopefully you understand that. I think it's just easier to visualize when I talk about it in marbles as opposed to maybe percentages of the game. So with that thought in mind, let's head back to the spreadsheet. Okay, so as I said, now we're going to throw ties out because we're just strictly looking for who's going to win the game, who's going to lose the game. So what I want to do here first, I need to know which side is the favorite. So to do this, I'm just checking the cumulative tabs and I'm looking for when that Team A column, and if it is greater than the Team B column, that means they're the favorite with our model. We think they're the favorite. If that is the case, we're simply going to take Team A's entire probability and divide that by Team B's entire probability. So we divide, in our case that we were doing with the marbles, it was simple. It was 6 divided by 2 or 3 divided by 1. And we come up with our probability of 3-1 there. What we're going to do here is the same thing. So we're going to be dividing, in this case, our cumulative total was 58.59% and 25.07%. When you divide those two, you come up with 2.34. And to keep it in American odds, you just want to multiply this by 100. So again, remember in your formula, you want to add a negative. If the Team A has a greater percentage than Team B, we're looking at a negative money line because they're the favorite. So we're going to want to add negative in. So if the Team A is greater than Team B in their win percentage probabilities, we're going to do negative Team A's percentage divided by Team B's percentage. That's it. If that's not the case, if they're not greater than Team A, if Team A is not greater than Team B, then obviously we think they're the underdog. And we're just going to do the opposite. We're going to divide Team B's percentage by Team A's percentage. And we're going to keep that positive because they're the underdog. We want that as a plus line. And we're going to multiply that as well by 100. In this case, we think Team A is the favorite because we've got them at a 3.2 expected score against 2.7. Obviously, they're going to be the favorite. And we see minus 234 is what the line should be in our model. That's how we're figuring out our model's line. The sportsbook has it at minus 250, so obviously this is not a great line for us because we're paying more than we think we should be based on the win probabilities that we have for this game. Now, Team B is always going to be just the opposite of what Team A is when we're looking at a two-way line. If this was a three-way line, we'd have three different lines. So now we get plus 234 because we're doing the same thing. I'm just looking to see, is Team A greater than Team B in their win probability? If not, that means Team B is the favorite. If Team B is the favorite, then of course we will do a negative line. You get the point. So we get plus 234 here as what we think the line should be on Team B. But again, the best we're getting is plus 210 at the sports book. So this would not be a very good bet for us either. If you had this as a three-way line, you could go back to our three-way line video. I talk about that. But if you had this as a three-way line, all you would do is now have three different possibilities, but they would all be based on 100%. So if we were doing a three-way line in this scenario, we would figure out what the line should be for 58.59% probability of coming out, 25%, and 16.15%. We'd want to know what the probability of a tie is. So that's going to change these lines quite a bit. Team A is not going to be as big of a favorite. Team B is going to be a bigger underdog because we're now bringing in, remember those marbles, we're adding yellow marbles into the equation. So now every time that yellow marble gets pulled out, that's an actual bet. So now there's three of us playing this game, let's say, and when yellow comes out, one of our friends is going to win on that bet. So as you can see, now there's four ways for black to lose. If we were playing that game again with the marbles, there's four ways for black to lose, as opposed to before there were only two ways for black to lose. And same thing with red. Red loses on 8 different polls as opposed to 6 different polls. So you can see the odds are going to be different. But refer back to my three-way video on three-way lines and you'll understand that concept a whole lot more. Let's dive into how can we figure out what the total will be on these games. Well, again, we've got 3.2 and 2.17. Now, you could just do a Poisson distribution on the combination of these two numbers. So 3.2 plus 2.17, you'd have 5.37, and then just do a Poisson distribution. using 5.37 as the projection, with the mean being 5.5. But since we already have the spreadsheet built out, I'm going to just show you how you could just take this spreadsheet and real simply figure out exactly what the probability would be, and then how to incorporate that into a line on your total. If you look here in under totals, I've added up what the final score total would be based on each and every one of these possible scores. So 0-0 would be a 0 total, of course, 1, so on and so forth. And we've got the probability of each one of those occurring. What I did here was create a pivot table. So if you're unfamiliar with creating pivot tables, super easy. You're just going to go into the Insert tab and create a pivot table. You're just going to select the data that you want to add into the pivot table. And in our case here, all I want are the totals. I'm looking for all these total numbers and, of course, the probabilities. And this is the pivot table that will pop up here for the actual score, the projected scores that we have in our hypothetical game. So we'll take that, and what I do is I like to copy that and then paste it. You can paste it anywhere you like. I'll paste it right next to the pivot table itself. And I just do this for ease, because if you start to refer back to the pivot table and look to do VLOOKUPs and things like that on this pivot table, it gets a little messy. So it's easier to just copy and paste it into new cells, and it's just much easier to work with. So we've done that, and now what we have are each total, right? All this is doing is taking all the 0 totals, all the 1 totals, all the 2 totals, and adding up all the probabilities so that we know what the combined probability is that we will score just 2 goals or just 3 goals. And it looks like 5 goals would be the most likely scenario. This, of course, is going to look like a bell curve because we're going to have somewhere around the average, which we are projecting about 5.27 or 5.37, whatever it was, goals in this game. So that's going to be 17% probability of that happening, flanked by the 4 and the 6 at about 16%, 12% by the 7 and the 3. That should make sense. It's going to look like a bell curve, and it's going to have its mean. It's the bulk of the probability of score is going to be somewhere between 4 and 6, and of course even more so between 3 and 7. So that's pretty typical of what a game would look like in a projected 5.5 goal type of scenario. So we've got that. We've got our cumulative percentages here. And then what I'm going to do is just look to the overs and unders, and I'm going to try to figure out which one of these goes under, which one of these goes over. So all I do is look to the total. I refer back. I'm referring back to cell B6, which is where we input the total that the sportsbook has. In this case, it was 5.5. All we're looking at here is this column, is this cell lower than 5.5? If it is, return the value in the under column, because that means it's one of our unders. If it is not, return 0. We do the same thing on the over column. Just check to see that this is over the 5.5. If it is, return it here as a percentage. If it is under, return 0. You're then going to have a whole bunch of probabilities leading up to, of course, 5, because everything from 5 down is an under. We're going to have a whole bunch of probabilities over the 5, and those, of course, are the probabilities that we go over. It turns out we have a 55% chance of this game going under, 45% chance of this game going over. Let's go back to our formula. What I have is my line would then be 123 plus 123 we have on the over. That's what you should be getting paid on the over. But the sportsbook is giving us minus 120 on the over. That's not a line. We don't want to play minus 120 when we should be actually getting closer to plus 120. But on the under, we're getting a bet of even money, and we think the under is a favorite here in this game. We think they should actually be minus 123. So we'd strongly be looking at playing an under on a game like this if this was offered to us at the sportsbook. All right, hopefully this gives you guys some ideas. And of course, you're going to have to incorporate your own models into this, or even if you have someone else's model and you just want to plug in their expected, maybe you're getting expected runs somewhere in the DFS world. Now, just be careful. A lot of the DFS expected run lines, if you're looking in hockey or for goals or baseball expected runs, they're just taking that based off of what the Vegas line or the sportsbooks lines are. But if you do come across someone who's actually trying to project scores on their own, I know we do that with our models here at the sharpbets.app. And over on the Sharp app, we've got MLB models, we've got NHL models where we do have projections for each and every team. You could then figure out on your own, you could have this spreadsheet and you could do your own calculations on what you think the line should be. So I hope you guys play with this a little bit. Of course, ask questions. Discord is always available to you guys. It's a great resource if you do have questions on how to do just about anything sports betting related, or you just want to say hi, head on over to the Discord channel. Of course, here in the Sharp app, we continue to bring you guys more educational content. That's what it's all about. We're trying to make you guys sharper and better sports bettors. We've got a YouTube page as well. If you're not familiar with the YouTube page, head on over there. Plenty of resources for you guys to build and become sharper bettors. So until the next video, I look forward to seeing you guys. Go make some money, and we'll talk soon.